Thank you for viewing Saddle Up. I'm Becky Bingman, the director of Texas Folk Life Gallery here in Austin, Texas. And with me are the co-curators of the Saddle Up exhibit, Lori Najvar and Joe Vitone. So we'll start with them just telling us a little bit about themselves, and then we'll go into why they created the exhibit. Lori, would you like to start first?
Sure. I'm Lori Najvar, and I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a native Texan, and I am director of Polka Works, which is a nonprofit where we focus on Texas culture, stories. We make documentaries and traveling exhibits, and we also produce some public programs. So I'm a visual artist and graphic designer by trade, but I'm very passionate about the human story, the human spirit, and I'm really interested in what makes the practices of cultural traditions practice.
I'm Joe Vitone. I'm a documentary fine art photographer. My subject matter centers often around life in the countryside, often around traditional agriculture, small scale agriculture. I've photographed in Costa Rica agriculture. I photographed in Texas, particularly in West Texas. This project, for my part, is mostly based around the town of Valentine, Texas. And I photographed a good deal in Italy also. I'm a professor of photo communications at St. Edward's University, where I've worked since 1991. So they've kept me there for over 30 years.
Thank you. Well, let's just start with sort of why did you create this exhibit, and what was the inspiration for that? And you guys can just take turns answering that question.
Joe Vitone and I have met at St. Edward's University, and he was a mentor of mine in one of the liberal arts classes that I was taking. And he teaches documentary photography, and he's worked on several Polka Works projects and doing panoramic photographs. And he was, and Joe, you want to speak to this now, he was interested in doing a Texas story, and that's how we came together with this Saddle Up Texas ranching story.
Yeah, and Lori and I had worked, like she says before. I really like the idea of getting outside of Austin and learning about the culture of Texas, because Austin can be a pretty, it kind of like for me in a lot of ways it lacks a deep cultural identity like you see in a lot of older communities. There's so many transplants, including myself. And Lori is like she said, a native Texan. And so we'd work together in multiple places. And when we first started talking about doing a project, it was just like, let's do something together, because this particular project is, over. We thought about youth rodeo, high school rodeo. And do you want to say something, Lori? You want me to keep going?
Yeah. So the youth rodeo, the high school rodeo, actually started in my hometown, Hallettsville, Texas. And although it's no longer held there, I've always been interested in youth rodeos, not as a participant, but I just have known a lot of people that have received scholarships for going to universities, and they learned so much about horsemanship and athleticism on their horses. But I myself am not a very good rider, but I just feel like I respect a lot of people that ride horses. So the youth rodeo was really something that we We attended a lot of them, and but then we started realizing it was a larger picture, that these entire families were involved with their children riding horses, but behind the scene there was a ranch and they're farming or they're raising cattle, and that's how we came to Saddle Up.
It was pretty organic evolution. Uh, we had a contact, Lon Taylor, out in Fort Davis in West Texas, and he put me in touch with three guys that I photographed and learned a lot from. And actually, the first time I photographed them, it was during roping. Uh, they have a nickname there, Los Tiveros, which is, I guess you could loosely translate it as the goat ropers. Uh, and they put on rodeo events there in Valentine, Texas, which is real hard scrabble ranching. So I photographed them just roping on one Sunday, and then that rapidly expanding into photographing their actual work. And for me, it's a lot more interesting and a lot more rewarding than photographing some choreographed event. I mean, things go wrong during rodeos, or not catastrophically wrong, but so there is some interest. But I found the people's actual lives far more interesting than any few hours spent on a weekend event. So basically, it became quickly obvious to me that the trips that we had made to youth rodeo, they were fine. There were some interesting images, but it was nowhere near as cogent and I think historically and culturally significant as photographing ranch families.
So once you'd made the contact with the families and had become photographing them and learning their story, what were the challenges that you came across that you didn't anticipate, or in doing this exhibit?
Kind of typical challenges. Where are you going to stay? Because I centered in photographing in Valentine, Texas, and this is basically, I mean, we received some small funding from outside funding, but basically we were bankrolling this ourselves. So I have a Ford F-150, #1 selling vehicle for many years now in the United States, that I'll sleep in the back of when I go someplace to work. So I had contacted a guy named Chewy, who's both the mayor of Valentine and the FedEx driver. Chewy said that I could sleep on the grounds of the Catholic Church. Having been an altar boy as a youth, I thought that was particularly appropriate, so I didn't mind taking that. And the first night in, first late evening in, I happened to meet Clay Miller. It was like I was looking around for where the church was, and I met Clay, and he said, "Why don't you come and stay at the bunkhouse? It needs somebody staying there. You can run the water, take a shower. It's just good for it." So I had found a place to stay for that week or 10 days of work that I did. And through Clay, I started making contacts with other people, not only the three Chiberos, which are Chewy or Jesus Nevarrete, Clay Miller, and Bodie Means. They're some of the my main contacts out there in Valentine, which is where the majority of the photography was done. But they put me in touch with other people also. So gaining trust, this is like typical documentary work. How do you explain what you're doing to people, make them feel comfortable around you, and the logistics, just getting there and back, driving from Austin to Valentine, Texas, is a good amount of time. So it's just kind of typical challenges.
Right. Yeah. Logistics frequently are.
And I'm going to add to that. This was a documentary about ranchers actually doing the work. So one of the important things is that you don't get in the way, but it's hard work, and you also don't want to interrupt their particular 3-day branding or, vaccination. And some of the ranchers out in Valentine they may be carrying a cell phone, but it might be a satellite phone where they're not reachable. So in my case, for videoing or interviewing people on camera was a little tough because you couldn't always reach the ranchers, and really you're depending on them being available in a space that you can get to. Again, you don't want to interrupt their work. So that was a challenge a couple of times.
And was there anything that that you learned that surprised you that you didn't anticipate? I mean, either about ranching or about photography or about documenting.
And I'm tough to surprise. Not too much surprises me, but I can tell you some interesting things. And stuff that the people live with all the time. One of the earlier nights that I was sleeping at the bunkhouse, I heard, tapping, and I figured it was just rats underneath it because it's like a trailer, which is, varmints and whatnot get under. But I finally said, oh, there's a damn person at the door. So I looked out and there was this kid standing there like shivering, asking me if he could come in, and just lay on the floor. And I said, man, this is not my place. I can't really have you come in, but I literally thought he was going to die because he was getting hypothermic, real cold, like winter, early spring, evening and winter, I guess it was. So I just said, okay, come on in, lay down, don't lay on the floor. I laid him down on the couch, covered him up, got him a can of soup, heated it up, gave him something to drink, and then woke up in the morning and told Clay, everybody there speaks Spanish pretty much. So I tell Clay in Spanish, Clay, we got a visitor. And I thought he was going to get pissed off and tell me I couldn't stay in the ranch house. I said, I'm really sorry I let this kid in. I said, oh, no, that's all right. That's fine. So then he calls, the Border Patrol, La Migra, and they come, put the zip ties on the kid, and I'm thinking, man, this guy's really a jerk, turning him in like that. Why didn't he just let him go? And so I started learning more about their situation there. He said, it used to be years ago, these people would come through here and we'd always give them work. But now, there's just such a huge percentage of them are, narcotraficantes, drug runners. They'll get these kids coming through, and if they lose something, they lose something. And, if they catch them, they get put in jail. But the main people are fine. So, and I'm thinking, well, that kid didn't have anything. And then it just starts unfolding where, oh yeah, they found his backpack under my pickup truck because that's what he'd been carrying. He left it under the truck. And then there were multiple other people under another trailer on that same complex for the ranch hand. They're for ranch hands when it's being worked. Clay's the ranch manager there. So there are all these people coming and still nothing at all to do with drugs. And then when we were out working in the corral the next day with the father-in-law of Chewy, one of the chiberos, they say, I'm going like, where is, the grandfather and Chewy? Oh, they had to go over to talk to La Migra because they found a big bale of marijuana that had been dropped, that they had to give it to the immigration folks, And this place is really near. You see the big, like, the kind of, I forget what the system is called, but like barrage balloons. They go up and they're tethered for observation for people coming across. So even though it looks like this big open ranch land, there's a lot of technology spread across the area controlling this. So these guys are living with this every day. which I think is a pretty interesting thing. Not surprising, but interesting.
Sounds like another subject for documentation.
A whole lot of people do that. Yep,
Um,
journalists.
and funny that you mentioned that, Becca, because what happens when you're starting to learn about or um, unveil a story or a subject that you don't know about, there's always another angle that you could choose in the storytelling and documentary work. Um, for me, the surprise in our field work was the Carter family. They live in Ezell, Texas, which is close to Hallettsville, between Victoria and Hallettsville. And they are a rice ranching family. And I was able to ride on their equipment during a harvest. And as much as I've seen, you know, large machinery in a rice field, I just had no idea how large the fields were and how deep the rice was. And it was fascinating to me. I felt privileged to be able to ride. They were very trusting in inviting me to do that. And so um, I still, every time I eat rice, which I love, I think about their harvesting, which is usually in August. And they have an organic field and they have a traditional brown rice as well. So that was really, really a great exploration for the story.
So, one thing that I've seen not only in West Texas but other places in agriculture is the ability of the farmer, the rancher, uh, to make a living off of agriculture, off a particular part of it, and then have other income streams. We were talking about this earlier, where, for example, again, I could use the example of Clay Miller. He runs his own cattle. You know, he runs them on a lease that he pays somebody else to run his cattle. So he runs his own cattle. He's a ranch manager for someone who I believe lives in New Mexico, and he's a farrier. He does horseshoeing, is well known in the area as a farrier, and then his wife also works. So they've got these different streams coming in. In work I've done in Costa Rica, you'll see people that are involved in organic agriculture, whatever type of agriculture. And then they're also known in the community as a place that you take your electric motors or different devices for repair. So you see a whole lot of this going on where they're putting together a living. You know, they're not just cowboying. Other people too. You know, Chuy Navarrete has, I believe he runs some of his own cattle, and then he cowboys for other people, and then he's a ranch manager. One guy that I photographed, if you remember, if you've looked at some of the pictures, Becky, which I'm sure you have, the one guy holding jewelry, his main income was being a cowboy, you know, and a hand, and now his primary stream of income is making jewelry for people, or spurs, Western themed jewelry. Even then, because I photographed him at his place, the place next to him, he takes care of the cattle at that place also. So he's still involved in that. These things generate, you know, ecosystems. Somebody is going to make money being a painter of cowboy folklore. Somebody's going to make money making hats. Somebody's going to make money making boots, making jewelry. So there's a lot of things going together, you know, at an economic. And I ended up thinking that was probably the most interesting part of it, the overlap of the economy.
And to add what Joe just said, the environment, especially in West Texas, is that here we're working on this, collecting the photographs and stories of these 3 ranchers in West Texas and 1 ranch family in Lavaca County, and yet the West Texas Cowboys, they are somewhat known nationally. The romantic idea of farmers and ranchers being on horses. Um, there were several really beautiful ranching documentaries that were being made simultaneously with our field work. And I even worked with one of the producers of both of those films, and he and I didn't even share that we were working on these projects. So we discovered we were working on them simultaneously. But, you know, I would say a lot of writers have featured the West Texas ranchers because the land is so vast. It takes 40 acres to feed one cow. And, you know, Marfa is on the radar and that area. But that it has its own its own tourism attraction, yet the ranching goes on generation after generation after generation.
What do you guys have coming down the pike, either collectively or individually? Are you working on something that we'll be able to see in the future?
I have, like I said, a long running project called Family Records. It's based in Akron, Ohio. Those are portraits. And then I've been working a lot as far as agriculture goes. I've been working in Italy for the past few years. And I've got, this is all like the COVID. There's a really beautiful space in this town, Polignano a Mare, and there's an art center there. And I have a major show slotted for there that was supposed to take place last year, may take place this year. I should, again, COVID stuff, I have a book coming out there of that. The project's called La Cultura dell'Agricoltura, like the culture of agriculture, that looks at everyday life in the Puglia is a region in southern Italy where goes down where the kind of heel of the boot is. So that's what I'm doing. I don't have anything going on in Texas. It's been a few years since we've done that. You know, I would love to work more in Texas. It's mostly, Lori's talking about documentary or filmmakers. Those guys make their living doing that. You know, I make my living teaching. So anything I do is in addition to my money job, which I love. But it's like, there's no way that you can have the same focus. Somebody with, you know, $500,000 budget, they wouldn't be sleeping in the back of their pickup truck. Nor did I. I slept in a ranch house.
The latest project that I'm really interested in and working on is a story that features 3 generational women. They were immigrants from different countries, and they came with their families to Texas. And it's basically, they all had the same story, even though the time span is from 1940s to 1990. And these girls at the time really helped their families navigate and learn English, and their stories aren't very different. So that story is called 3 Paths, 1 Journey right now. That's a working title, but it's well on its way. And then there's another story I've been wanting to feature the instrument, the accordion, and I've found some fascinating musicians, but people associate the accordion with, you know, ethnic music and just being like the polka or conjunto, but really the instrument itself and how these characters embrace and how they've learned to play is really exciting. So that's another story I'm working on.
Well, thank you both. And you can learn more about each of these documentary artists on their websites that we have listed below. And thanks again. And best of luck on your projects.
You're welcome, Becky. Thanks for your interest in it.
Thanks. And I'm a big fan of Texas folk life, and so it's an honor to be a part of a virtual exhibit with you all. So thanks for all the work that y'all do.